I'm Logan Crawford, and right now on Spotlight, we dive into the poignant world of Curt Curtin's latest poetry collection. It is called In Our Name, Poems. As Curt faces health challenges, his wife of 43 years, Dee O'Connor, steps in to discuss this powerful compilation that tackles violence, human suffering, and nature's predatory forces. Join us right now as Dee shares insights into Curt's award-winning poetry and his enduring legacy. We're delighted to have this very talented author's work here on Spotlight today, and we thank the folks at Atticus Publishing for helping us put Dee in the spotlight today to discuss Curt's latest book of poetry. Dee, great to see you here today on Spotlight.
Great to be back.
How's Curt doing? Let's just get an update on how he is.
He's doing okay.
Yeah.
Taking one day at a time. It's things don't get too much better, but they're not getting worse, so that's good.
That's good. You curated the poems in this collection, right?
With him. So, 6 years ago, we sat down and mapped out all of his work and how it might fit into various volumes. And so this is the 6th collection that we kind of had mapped out at that time. So we figured out what should go in this one and what would be the connections and what would be a natural order and those sorts of things. So we did that
great.
together.
Tell us how his personal journey and experiences influenced the themes in our name poems.
Well, a lot of it is his attention to what's going on in the world. He has always been very interested in seeing, the news and what's going on. And, it's been a pretty tough century almost, certainly the 21st century we've seen a lot of violence. We've seen, all over the world and in this country. And he's been interested both in his own life, what he's observed and felt or seen among people that he's known, and what he's seeing happening in the world. And the connections across all the different countries and themes is still at its core that human struggle for how to be humane, and the natural tendency we seem to have to be sometimes predatory and violent.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been a troubled century for sure, and it seems like the latter part of it has been unbelievable when it comes to unheard of violence taking place in our culture. Talk to me a little bit about the name of the collection, In Our Name, Poems.
So In Our Name is actually, and it's not an unusual phrase, it's been in other publications too, but it actually came from one of the poems in the book. And there's the first line of it in a poem called Possibility, and I'll read it if that's okay.
Sure, I'd love to hear
it. In our name, we, the state, embrace war without true account of outcomes, naming only the sins of enemies, hiding our gains behind a wall of flags. And that's thematically what you see in a lot of the poems, is that, struggle that we have as patriotic people to, not impose our values on others and not assume that their differences are something worthy of our violence.
Yeah. And also our energies and our attention seem so much directed at violence and killing and war. I mean, if you think of the $100 billion that just recently has been sent overseas to make wars continue. It makes you wonder what our priorities are when we have dirty air, dirty water, people homeless, and so forth, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a struggle when you see a country like Ukraine getting so bombarded and hurt that they need support. And how do you give them support without being a part of the violence? And
exactly,
in some ways we need to at times, but it's how do we find ways to avoid the violent solutions?
Exactly. Conflict resolution before it gets to this point, before, untold numbers of people are dying in that conflict. It's unbelievable.
Ceasefire, let's find some ways to negotiate back to peace.
Absolutely. Do you have a favorite poem in the book?
Oh, I do and I don't. I mean, favorite is hard to say about this book because the poems are really hard and raw and painful at times. There's one that particularly jumps out at me called Girl from Darfur, that is about, and it's not not a recent poem, it was many years back, but the same thing happens every day, where a young girl who's, raped by a gang of people from a war, ends up, becoming pregnant and giving birth, and, trying to figure out whether, to keep this child or not. She loves the child, but the child reminds her of all the pain and the anger. And it's a very powerful poem that way. It was an award winner in Connecticut for that reason. It just speaks to that painful kind of experience. But there are so many that lines will jump out at me that I, absolutely love, and that grab my attention. So there's one called Hiding in a Lavatory Stall, about a young boy who had autism, who ended up murdering someone. And the ending of that one was so striking to me that, where did I put it? I had it right here. Yeah, I didn't. I want the rest of us to be compassionately wise, to set aside our ancient retributions. If that may be the only good that we can make of this, let us try. It's one of the hopeful things that Curt sees in something that was tragic and painful. There are a lot of the poems that there are pieces of them that are very striking that way to me, either in how they capture the pain, or in how they suggest a resolution or a challenge to us as humans.
Yeah. Is Curt continuing to write, and do you have any other books perhaps coming up?
He has other books coming. He isn't really able to write right now, but he has several books that we've still got in the pipeline. One that's a remake of a book that was for children, for young adults, that we have now a bilingual version of it. So we're looking to get a bilingual, English and Spanish version published. And then what I think is his best book is yet to come, is one on science and soul, that is just exploring the human search for meaning in life in all kinds of ways, with and without religion. And then there's our love poems that someday will come out, but they're not not going to be out for a while. So
That's wonderful. I was going to say, how do you plan on keeping Curt's poetic legacy alive for generations of readers?
well, I want generations of readers to know these poems, because I think they really are exceptional. And so working with him to get them into collections was the first step toward that. And then trying to get those more broadly realized. So in this collection in particular, we've been initiating discussions with peace activist groups and groups that are working towards social justice, to see if they might like to use the books as a part of a fundraiser. And we're not looking to capture the royalties. We'll let them have that as their profits. But having people who have a passion that connects to a particular work find a way to use it that way.
Yeah, that's
He did
wonderful.
something similar with his young adult collection, working with schools to get schools to adopt them. So we're hoping that will continue.
That would be wonderful. How do you think Curt's background as an English professor has shaped his approach to poetry?
Well, it came of his love of language that
Mhm.
preceded all of it. And he's just, he was interested in the history of the language and different forms of the language. And so he, as an English professor, those were some of the things he taught, as well as teaching poetry and creative writing. But I think it's just that appreciation for the power of literature that drove and drives him, and the ability to communicate what we're internally feeling as humans in a way that grabs your attention, really holds on to you, so that it leads to action.
Absolutely. Does Curt have a huge anthology, or a large anthology perhaps, that has not been published yet, that you're still going through, combing through, curating for the best works to put out there before the public?
When I first thought about publishing his work, I thought about doing it as an anthology, and then I realized mostly people are putting poetry out in smaller increments now. And so there may be a time at which that it makes sense to pull it all into an anthology, but each collection is kind of a self-contained unit where it has a thematic connection, and it has, sometimes similarities in the types of poems or the audience for poems, so that each could be a chapter in an anthology. But I've been trying to get all of his good poems into various collections, so that then in the future, if there is really an audience that wants to hear more, they can get it in a different form. So we're
Wonderful.
definitely
And the
open to it.
theme of In Our Name, what's the theme of this collection?
Well, it's the violence and human suffering, and what the meaning of that is, and how we can make meaning of that, how we can reach people to try to work together toward more peaceful solutions. So
Wonderful.
it's kind of calling on the audience to witness, to bear witness to the violent things that have happened. And he starts with the Garden of Eden, so he kind of covers human history in a way.
Yeah.
And then, and it brings it up pretty much to the current day, mostly because things haven't been changing for such a long time.
Right.
But it's the painful side of that, but with a ray of hope that if we can pay attention and witness what the meaning is for individuals and for large groups of people, that we can find ways to change our behaviors.
Wonderful. That would be God's work for sure. The name of the book is In Our Name, Poems. It is written by Curt Curtin, and it is an amazing collection that tackles the problems of violence and human suffering and nature's predatory forces as well. It's been curated by his wife, Dee, and she's been good enough to join us here today and share the word of his latest work. Dee, thanks so much for being our guest today.
Thank you, Logan. It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure's been all mine.
Reach out.
Thank you. And to the folks at home, I'm Logan Crawford, thanking you for your time this time. Until next time on Spotlight.
Thank you much.